What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Cyclonic Thrift channel. Once again, today we are going back to the Modern Horizons 3 set release, looking at a fun new commander, a little bit more sinister this week than the previous weeks. We've got Shilgengar, Sire of Famine. So he's 3 and 2 black for a 6/6 legendary creature Elder Demon with flying. He's got two main abilities. So the first is sacrifice another creature and create a blood token. If you sacrifice an angel this way, create a number of blood tokens equal to its toughness instead. So you're getting value out of a free sack outlet on your commander, creating those blood tokens. For those who aren't familiar, blood tokens are artifact tokens like treasures, clues, food, that sort of thing. And you pay 1, sacrifice the blood token to discard a card and draw a card. So not necessarily card advantage because it's lose 1, gain 1. But it's a way to kind of cultivate your graveyard, keep your hand pretty steadily full while doing it, in preparation for Shilgengar's second ability, which is pay 3 mana in any combination of white and black, sacrifice 6 blood tokens, and return each creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. And those creatures are vampires in addition to their other types. So this massive graveyard recursion effect is super sick. And the key here is it doesn't say activate only as a sorcery, right? So you don't have to do this on your turn. You are able to do this if you have all the resources available, are able to do this on the end step of the opponent right before you, so that when all those creatures come in, you're not going to have to worry about summoning sickness. You can attack right away with them. And with that kind of mass graveyard recursion, there's a good chance that you overwhelm the board at that point and at least take out one player, if not the whole table. But there's a couple main strategies in this deck we want to focus on. One is famous Orzhov Aristocrats. There's a sacrifice outlet on the commander. We want a lot of effects that trigger when we're sacrificing creatures, when creatures that we control die, that sort of thing. We want to be creating blood tokens, right? We want to get to that magic number of 6 as quick as possible. We want to be able to have access to that second ability as quickly as we can. And we want to be able to have creatures in our graveyard to make that ability worthwhile, right? Because paying 3 mana, sacrificing the tokens, and returning 3 creatures to the battlefield is kind of nice. You know, it's technically paying 3 mana and then a bunch of random stuff for 3 creatures, so it's not bad. But we really want to be able to overwhelm the board with that ability there. So like I said, we have a couple cards here that are more around the Aristocrat theme. Cards like Cruel Celebrant, white and a black for a 1/2 creature vampire. Whenever it or another creature or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Pretty self-explanatory. That drain and gain ability is famous in Orzhov, and we're absolutely going to take advantage of a lot of cards that have that ability. Norn's Wellspring, 1 and a white for an artifact. Whenever a creature you control dies, scry 1 and put an oil counter on Norn's Wellspring. And you can pay 1 and tap it to remove 2 oil counters from Norn's Wellspring and draw a card. So this is an awesome, just incidental card advantage, card selection strategy. That scry trigger is actually going to be super nice. Because we're going to have a lot of little creatures dying, a lot of big creatures dying to create those blood tokens. And so we're going to be racking up the oil counters, and then be able to pay 1 mana to draw a card is going to be sweet. Especially since those blood tokens are not card positive. We want to find ways to be able to keep our hand full and increase our hand so that we have more opportunities to put the exact cards we want into our graveyard. And then we've got Corpse Knight, white and a black for a 2/2 creature zombie knight. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. So super simple. We'll be playing out a lot of little creatures. This will hopefully drain your opponents pretty quickly and just keep them low enough so that our final big attack with Shilgengar's ability is enough to take them out. And then we've got a lot of cards that synergize well with those blood tokens, right? So we want cards that care about when we're creating tokens, when we're sacrificing tokens, when we're discarding cards, that sort of thing. And this first one, Dying to Serve, 2 and a black for an enchantment. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, I mean, this is perfect, right? So we Those blood tokens can be sacrificed at instant speed. So with Shilgengar out, right, we sacrifice a creature to create a blood token. Then we sacrifice that blood token to discard a card, draw a card. That triggers Dying to Serve, we create a zombie. And then on the next opponent's turn, you just do that again. It's a new turn, so it triggers again. Then you do that on the next opponent's turn, the next opponent's turn. In the course of a turn cycle, you've basically cycled through 4 cards, had 4 ETBs with creatures, had 4 death triggers as well. So this card is actually going to do a lot of work in this deck. It's going to be really, really nice. Next is Glass Cast Heart. 2 and a black for an artifact. Whenever one or more vampires you control attack, create a blood token. So there's not a ton of vampires in this deck, at least not a ton of natural vampires, but there are a few, and so they'll definitely be able to trigger this a handful of times. But really, we're here for the second 2 abilities. So there's one pay 1 black, tap, pay 1 life to create a 1/1 white and black vampire creature token with lifelink. Again, you're creating that creature token. We could use it as sacrifice fodder, but also has lifelink. So there's a way to kind of take advantage of some life gain here, get our life total high, and the drain effects to affect our opponents a lot more. And then there's a pay 2 black, tap to sacrifice the Glass Cast Heart, and 13 blood tokens. Each opponent loses 13 life, and you gain 13 life. Are we going to get up to 13 blood tokens? Maybe. I mean, it's not going to happen a lot, but if it does, this is a huge swing. Where, I mean, at this point in the game, if you have 13 blood tokens, it's pretty far in the game. Most of your opponents are going to be at 25 or less life, so this ability gets pretty much everybody else into single digits. You gain 13 life, give yourself some breathing room. It's a pretty massive swing. It's a big cost, but if your commander hasn't been out, if they've just been removing it and you just have all those blood tokens in excess, this is a nice way to sink it and make sure they're not just uselessly sitting there. And then we've got Mirkwood Bats. 3 and a black for a 2/3 creature bat with flying. Whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. We are going to be creating a ton of tokens and sacrificing a ton of tokens. Mirkwood Bats in token strategies in Orzhov Aristocrats is just brutal. It has been the thrift pick for quite a few decks in the past, and it could have been the thrift pick for this deck as well. I went in a different direction for this deck tech, but it is going to put in a ton of work, especially when we're sacrificing those big angels and making a ton of blood tokens that way. We're going to be draining each of our opponents for a ton of life. And speaking of, we've got a bunch of large angels here because Shilgengar's ability, sacrificing angels, makes blood tokens equal to their toughness. We want angels that are at least 5 or 6 power, right? Because that way sacrificing 1 angel gets us to that, pretty much gets us to that threshold of having the 6 blood tokens to be able to use for Shilgengar's second ability. And so we want angels with large toughness. So these next few cards are just some examples. We've got Aegis Angel, 4 and 2 white for a 5/5 creature angel with flying. And when it enters, another target permanent gains indestructible for as long as you control Aegis Angel. Most likely it'll be the commander, but maybe there's another permanent on the board, another combo piece that we've got that we want to protect. So we got some flexibility there, but most likely it'll be here to protect our commander, which will be huge. We got Valkyrie Harbinger, 4 and 2 white for a 4/5 creature angel cleric, has flying and lifelink. At the beginning of each end step, if you gain 4 more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with vigilance and flying. So, I mean, the lifelink is huge, right? So if as a blocker, this is awesome, because not only is it going to be gaining you 4 life, but your opponents know that when you gain that 4 life, you're going to be getting a 4/4 angel at the end of the end step. So it's just a great way to dissuade your opponents from attacking into you. It's creating those angels, which we can use as attackers, we can use as sacrifice fodder, all that good stuff. And it's an angel, so when we sacrifice it, we create a bunch of blood tokens. And then we've got Angel of the Ruins, 5 and 2 white for a 5/7 artifact creature angel, has flying. And when it enters the battlefield, exile up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. And then it has plane cycling for 2 as well. But this is just nice. Again, Massive Angel, when we sacrifice, create a bunch of blood tokens. And when we reanimate it, when we recur it to the battlefield, we're going to be able to get some artifact enchantment removal in there as well, which is just going to feel really sweet. That brings us to the vegetable portion of the deck. For those who haven't seen the channel before, the vegetable portion is when I go through a few categories of cards that you absolutely have to include in your deck if you want to maintain pace, maintain consistent deck performance with the higher budget, higher power decks at the table. Those categories are mana ramp, card draw, and removal, and we're just going to zoom through a few cards in each of those categories here. The first is Wayfarer's Bauble. 1 mana artifact where you pay 2 to tap and sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your deck. Arcane Signet. Pay 2 mana for an artifact, you tap it to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. And we've got Talisman of Hierarchy. Another 2 mana artifact you can tap to add colorless, or you can tap to add a white or a black, and it deals 1 damage to you. In terms of card draw, we've got Transmogrant's Crown, 2 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0. Whenever equipped creature dies, you draw a card. And it's got a couple of equip costs. Again, for a sacrifice deck, you equip this to a creature for 1 black mana. You're going to sacrifice it anyway to get some value. This will just allow you to draw a card off of it, which is nice. Grim Haruspex, 2 and a black for a 3/2 creature human wizard. Has Morph, not really worried about that. But whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you draw a card. Are very interested in that. That's going to be huge for this deck. And then Smothering Abomination, 2 and 2 black for a 4/3 creature Eldrazi. Has flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature, and whenever you sacrifice a creature, you draw a card. I'm liking this card a lot in any kind of Aristocrat, any kind of sack deck. It's a lot of value. The downside of having to sacrifice a creature at your upkeep is significant. I'm definitely not overlooking that. But in our deck, in our strategy, which is, aimed around that anyway, we're always going to have a random creature to just sacrifice. And when we do that as a punishment, so to speak, we get to draw a card. It's definitely worth keeping in the deck. And for removal, we've got Path to Exile. 1 white for an instant, exile target creature. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. We've got Generous Gift, 2 and a white for an instant. Destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. And then Tragic Arrogance, 3 and 2 white for sorcery. There's some complicated text here. For each player, you choose from among the permanents that player controls an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker. Then each player sacrifices all other non-land permanents they control. So this includes you as well, but you get to choose basically your 4 best stuff. Now, we don't have any planeswalkers in here, and most of your opponents probably won't either. So it's really, you get to keep your best artifact, your best creature, and your best enchantment. And everybody else, you choose the absolute bare minimum. So maybe there's an artifact creature token or something that you get to choose, and that counts for both the artifact and the creature. Anyway, it's a board wipe for the whole table, but you come out on top, and we're going to be bringing back those creatures anyway, so we're not too worried about losing our board here. And that brings us to the Thrift pick of today's deck. For those who haven't seen the channel before, the Thrift pick is the card I don't necessarily think is objectively the best in the deck. It's probably not the most expensive, it's not the highest rated, but it is a card that I'm very excited to see play out in this deck strategy. A card that I think that fits really, really well into what we're trying to do. And for this deck, that card is Baron Bertram Greywater. 2, a white and a black for a 3/4 legendary creature vampire noble. Actually a new card from the Thunder Junction set. And it has whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 black vampire rogue creature token with lifelink. This ability triggers only once each turn. And then a second ability where it's 1 and a black to sacrifice another creature or artifact to draw a card. So the one trigger per turn is a little restrictive, but again, we're going to be trying to do that with our blood tokens on our opponent's turns. So in an entire rotation, this should still net us quite a few creatures with lifelink, which will be helpful. And then it has that sacrifice ability, so we can get creatures into our graveyard to then reanimate with our commander. Draws us some extra cards. This is going to be a really nice engine value piece that really fits well into two main strategies that we're trying to use. And that brings us to the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please like it. Comment down below if you can think of some cards I might have missed, probably should have included. Please let us know. If you aren't already, please subscribe to the channel. And until next time, stay safe and stay thrifty.